Greg, before we talk football on the field, let's talk off the field. Dave Remington, the interim AD now as Nebraska goes back to keeping it in the family and hoping for at least some different perspective initially.
Well, and what a nice man. I don't know Dave real well. I've met him a couple of different times, but a very nice man. And I think a wise move by Chancellor Green to bring in somebody who is a Nebraskan, understands what this place is about, but hasn't been involved in the day-to-day workings of this department and can kind of give a fresh look at this department over the next 60 days. And he's not going to make any sweeping changes. There's not enough time for him to do that, nor does he really want to do that. But he's going to observe, talk to people, meet with boosters, settle them down, tell them, hey, this is going to be all right. Here's the university's plan moving forward, and here's why the change was made. And he can go out and articulate all that. And I think, as he just said, calm the waters a little bit. And I think he'll be perfect for that role.
Well, Nebraska got what they needed last Saturday, and that was a win in Big Ten opener against Rutgers. Let's start with that first drive of the game for the Scarlet Knights. You and I talked a lot about last week about Jerry Kill and how it was going to be this run-first approach, and they come out throwing the ball, and they're very effective on that first drive.
Yeah, and I think that caught Nebraska a little off guard. I think they thought exactly what you just laid out. It was just going to be pound, pound, pound. And to their credit, they had a nice little design drive to begin the game. And that can happen. I mean, and that's what these coaches do all week. They game plan to try to score on the opening drive, so tip your cap. But then, boy, Bob Diaco locked it in from that point on. I mean, that was a 75-yard drive. They end up with 194 for the game. So after that, it was a dominant performance for the Blackshirts, who now have put together 10 quarters of only allowing 2 touchdowns. There's been a nice uptick in what this defense has done the last couple of weeks, and I expect more of the same as we move through this game tonight.
And credit the Husker offense because they responded right away with a 7-play drive of their own going 75 yards. Tanner Lee was 3 for 3 on that drive, hit J.D. Spielman for a touchdown pass, and you think, okay, this offense is clicking, Tanner Lee's clicking, and that was the last of the really good Tanner Lee we saw for much of that ball game.
That was a nice answer back because, everybody was nervous in the stadium. You see Rutgers march down, grab the lead, coming off 2 straight losses. What's this team going to do? And I thought not only that drive, but later in the game, Nebraska had a couple of answers, which were good to see. I call it kind of grit. I think we saw some grit out of this team, and that was a good mix. I liked what Nebraska and how Danny Langsdorff called that opening drive last week.
Let's talk about Tanner Lee, because after that 3 for 3 start, he goes 3 of his next 10 in the first half, throws an interception, comes out right away in the second half, throws that pick 6. The one thing we were not seeing in this game that we'd seen, Greg, was that Tanner under a tremendous amount of pressure, which were affecting a lot of those throws. But I'm wondering, is that in his head now, even if he's not getting the pressure? Is that clock going off too soon and he's making some bad decisions? Because I know the first interception, for instance, he threw off his back foot and that throw never should have been made.
Absolutely. That was, as soon as that ball goes up in the air, you're all like, no.
Yeah.
And it's exactly turned into what you thought it would be, a ball that hung up there into the wind. And you expect more out of a guy who is, a fourth-year college player. I mean, that's just something you can't do. And you're absolutely right. You wonder, where is he mentally right now? Now, a lot of people feel like after the pick 6 he threw in the third quarter that he really settled in and played well. But I think some of the credit should go to the run game. I think Nebraska really got the run game going up. But I know the coaches are nervous about where he is mentally, where is his head right now, and can he lock it in? He needs just a really clean performance. We got that out of him week 1 against Arkansas State, didn't throw any picks. He needs that kind of a bounce back, and maybe that happens tonight.
A lot of speculation as to whether he would see the field again late in that second half last weekend. Do you think he's on a shorter leash in this game tonight?
I don't get that feeling.
Okay.
I mean, Mike Rod has been asked about it multiple times about, did you ever think about going to the next guy? No. And I think, here's why. I think the coaches who are at practice every day realize, and the players on the team realize, Tanner Lee gives Nebraska the best chance to succeed, and that he's the number 1 quarterback. Now, everybody can sit here. We're all armchair quarterbacks ourselves and offensive coordinators ourselves. But why not just let somebody else have another series here or there? But that's just not how they're choosing to do it, and I see their logic behind that.
Probably the best news coming out of the Rutgers game offensively is Divina Zigbo has been found, and he's alive and well and running the football for Nebraska.
Yeah, and go back to Mike Riley's comments in August. He said, we have 3 backs we really like, and actually 4 with Jalen Bradley. And he kept saying during August, it's really close. And then we saw Trey Bryant explode in those first 2 games. You're like, well, it must not have been close. But then Mikhail Wilbon has a good game, and now Devine Ezigbo has a good game. So all of a sudden, you feel pretty good about the running back position for Nebraska. And Trey will not play tonight, so it's going to be the same combination of Wilbon and Ezigbo. I do like the fact, Jeff, that they've kind of gone back and kind of split carries up a little bit. I wasn't a big fan of the first week with the 31 carries for Trey. I think those fresh legs really add up for a team, and I like the fact that it's Wilbon early and then kind of more the hammer with Devine later in the game when the defense wears down some.
And we mentioned not a lot of pressure on Tanner Lee. We also mentioned the success of the running game, which means we need to acknowledge the offensive line had a much better performance than they did against Northern Illinois.
Sure did, and hats off to that.
Yeah.
You had 2 first-time starters last week with Decker at center and then Hymas playing right tackle, and they both did a really nice job. I think you'll see the same 5 tonight. The good news is that the availability of both David Neville and Cole Conrad is there. They both made this trip and are both available to play tonight should there be somebody get nicked up or some ineffective play. And so all of a sudden now you're like, okay, now we have some legitimate depth because of injuries. We've had to play other guys, and they perform pretty well. And so that's encouraging, and you're right. Last week, Tanner, he didn't get sacked. He got hit a couple times, but it was a pretty clean night. So I'm really proud of that group up front against a decent front for Rutgers. That's maybe one of the strengths of their football team is their front 7.
And we mentioned that defense keeping Rutgers out of the end zone after that first drive. And how about those big second-half interceptions from Antonio Reed and also Luke Gifford?
Fantastic. Luke Gifford, my goodness, how well is he playing? There's not one guy in that defense, Jeff, that has benefited more from the change to the 3-4 than Luke Gifford. And I'm really I'm proud of him. He's making a huge impact week after week. At this point, I don't think there's any doubt he's the MVP of that defense, the way he's played, and just a gritty, tough performer for this team, and just really happy that he's now getting the chance to show off his skills.
So let's go to tonight's game. Friday Night Lights for the Huskers. A lot of these guys playing under the lights for the first time since their high school days.
Well, remember we played Arkansas State Saturday night game. But
for a Friday night game, yeah.
In fact, the last midweek game for the Cornhuskers, you have to go back to 2010 when Nebraska went down to Manhattan and beat K-State. Taylor Martinez went crazy in that game. That's the last midweek night game for Husker football. So, yeah, a little different, certainly controversial. We've talked an awful lot about this over the last year since the Big Ten announced last spring they wanted to play a couple of Friday night games. League has backed off that a little bit. I think you'll see that change moving forward, but it's on the schedule. It's really weird, though, Jeff, how this thing laid out with Nebraska being the road team, having played last week. Illinois didn't play last week. They get to stay at home. They didn't have to travel. A lot of advantages tipped to the Illini, and I think it's why some people feel like this is going to be a really close game tonight because they've had 2 weeks to prepare, and they didn't have to travel in a short week. So some disadvantages for Nebraska, but you suck it up, you don't talk about it a whole lot, and you go on and play.
Boy, and if there's a team that needs extra preparation, it's the Illini. The youngest team in the country. They start 10 true freshmen. They'll play 18 true freshmen. How do you do that?
The rebuilding project is underway. Oof. And Lovie Smith has convinced the administration. The administration's totally on board here that it's going to take some time, and rightfully so. This was a program that was in a mess when he walked in the door, and he had a bunch of seniors last year, and they still didn't win very many football games. So he's gone the youth movement. They don't have a whole lot of upperclassmen, but I'll tell you, there's some of these freshmen that are talented players. They have 2 defensive ends in Roundtree and Gay that are really quick off the edge. Nebraska's tackles will be tested tonight in this game. Now, they had trouble with the dual threat quarterback from South Florida 2 weeks ago. But when the 2 pocket passers that they faced in the first 2 games, they did a pretty good job defending. So they're licking their chops in Nebraska's offense coming in here tonight.
Yeah, they're fast, but a little undersized with that 4-3 defense under Hardy Nickerson. They have given up a lot of yards against the run, but you mentioned Roundtree. He's got 3 of their 8 sacks, and he's one of those really, really good young players on that defense.
He sure is, and they like Gay an awful lot on the other side. But you mentioned the key to the game, and I think will be a big part of Danny Langsdorff's game plan tonight, and that's pound the football at this undersized front and get those big offensive line going downhill a little bit. So I think Ezigbo will be a big part of the game plan again tonight like it was last week.
Offensively, they've had some protection issues, 110th in rushing, 102nd in passing, 106th in scoring. Chase Crouch started the first 3 games. He's only thrown 1 touchdown and 3 picks. And then Jeff George Jr., There's a name from the past for Illini fans, of course, with his dad, probably the best quarterback in Illini history. He came on in the second half of that South Florida game, threw for 211 yards. So who are we going to see tonight?
Both.
Okay,
You see both. I think Crouch will start, and they've had issues along the offensive line. In fact, you talked about those true freshmen. They'll probably start 2 true freshmen on their offensive line tonight. It's been leaky for them. They've not been able to get much of a ground game established, as your numbers pointed out. Crouch is a dual threat guy. He has the ability to take off and run, but he was kind of running for his life in some of their early games this year. George is a better passer. So I think we'll see both quarterbacks. Nebraska's prepared throughout the week to see both guys, and they just bring different skill sets to the table. This is an offense, and I said it earlier, I don't think challenges Nebraska a ton tonight. I think, for Illinois to win this game, they may have to find another way to score through their defense, through their special teams, because I just don't see them marching up and down the field much tonight against this Husker defense.
So for the third week in a row now, we've got a Nebraska team that is supposed to win a game against a team that is struggling, and yet nothing is certain anymore, as we've seen in this season, and it's all going to depend on what kind of start Nebraska gets off to.
That's exactly right. Can't be sleepy coming on the road. And, I think for a lot of these guys, and although not a lot of them played 2 years ago here, Nebraska came in here on a dreary day, led for the entire game, and then 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns by Illinois ripped it away from the Big Red late. And so Nebraska would love to get a little payback on that. But you go to last year's game, even in Lincoln, it was the Illini who were up going to the fourth quarter of that game, and Nebraska had a long drive that they were able to convert a fourth and 1 down around the 3-yard line. Barely got it. It was a spot review. Nebraska ended up punching that in and then scoring a couple more times in the fourth quarter to win going away. But Illinois has defended Nebraska pretty well, particularly last year with Loving at the helm, with Hardy Nickerson as their defensive coordinator. So I expect them to really play Nebraska hard tonight in this game.
But what a difference a week makes, Greg, because so many negatives, so much discussion about going into that game last week against Rutgers, and now a lot of positives to build off of coming out of that win.
No doubt. That game last week was huge for the season. Just needed a win. Didn't matter if it was by 1 point, by 10 points, by whatever. Win and get the momentum and the ball rolling the other direction. And how about this, Husker fans? A win tonight here in Illinois, and all of a sudden Nebraska's 2-0 in the league and out in front of the pack. That's a pretty good spot to be. You have to win these early games, and this will be a key game tonight for Nebraska to keep this rolling because we know what's ahead. It's that big matchup with Wisconsin in a week. And if you can get a back-to-back wins, one of those being on the road, you're going to have a much more confident team getting ready to line up against the Badgers next week.